this video, we'll be looking at some of the retouching tools that we have available to us in Photoshop. Retouching can be a great way to improve our images. We just have to be careful when we're using some of these tools that we're using the correct tool for the job, because you can end up making your images look like they've been doctored. So with this first image, we're going to look at how we can remove the text off this cup. So if I come across to my toolbar, there are a few tools that I could use to do this, but the one I'm going to choose is the Spot Healing Brush tool. So I'll select that one. When we're using the Spot Healing Brush tool, we often use it for thin lines. It can be good for spots on skin and that sort of thing, and also fine lines and wrinkles. In this case, because the text is quite fine, I'm going to remove the text using this tool. And before I use it, I'm going to come up to the toolbar, like with all my tools, and just check what settings I have here. So I've got my brush setting here. So I want to have that size sitting a little bit larger than the actual size of the line that I'm trying to cover, which it is. And then with this hardness level, I'll take it down to about, say, 70%, which is going to give me a slightly soft edge, but not too soft that it'll be blurry. All right, so now that I've set the brush size, I'll come across, and from the different types of healing options I have here, I'm going to choose the Content Aware healing option. Now that Content Aware healing option will basically take pixels that are around the area that I'm selecting and basically grab these pixels and superimpose them over the top of the area that I'm trying to mask off or clean up. So I'll come down to my writing now, and I'll just start at the bottom of the letter. Now as I click and hold down and drag with this, what happens is I get this black line appearing over the top of the area that will be refined. And there you can see it's done a pretty good job at replacing that text with the pixels that are surrounding it. And I can just continue to just click and drag, and I'm using a drag type motion, and I'm doing it in smaller sort of drags, not trying to trace over the whole text in one swoop, just slowly sort of dragging myself along. As you can see, it doesn't always give you the result you want, but you just go back over the top of it again and it should clean it up for you. You may even need to go in and do some further retouching after you've done this initial pass, but it looks like it's picking up on these pixels quite well. So just doing these smaller drags across here. I'll come up from the bottom here as well, and it's even picking up on some of the tone around the edge of this cup. Great, so I've almost finished that one. So now with this edge here, I'm going to have to zoom in a little bit closer to fix this one. So just zooming in, and in order to get that nice sharp edge, the best option here is to just copy and paste maybe the top part of the edge here over the top of that area. It's going to be hard to get a clean line using this tool. So what I'll do is I'll come across, grab my selection tool, grab the polygon lasso tool, and I'll make a selection just above the area that I'm trying to fix up, just following that edge there, and then I'll click off to the side here to create a large edge there, and then I'll just use my Control or Command C to copy, and then Control or Command V to paste, and that's now dropped that directly on top of itself. And I'll just move that down a little bit lower there, and then just drag it around slightly there just to put it on a bit of an angle, and then hit Enter or Return to commit to that. And then I can just patch the edge of this. So I'll just flatten that edge now onto the layer underneath, coming across to the Layers panel. I'll select that layer there, and from my Layers panel, I'll come down to Merge Down, so it just flattens it on that layer. And then I'll jump back across to my Spot Healing Brush tool here. I'll reduce the size of the brush down a little bit there, and then I can just drag over the top of the area where these marry up, just to try and smooth that out a little bit. Cool, so that's cleaned up most of that. I'll just zoom out now and see how that's looking. It's not looking too bad. I'd probably need to go back in and continue to play around with that area just to help smooth it out a little bit. And I could do that by continuing to use the Spot Healing tool. Otherwise, I could potentially use the Clone Stamp tool, which we'll be looking at in a couple of minutes. Okay, so that's the first retouch done. Let's open up another file. Okay, so I have this second file open. So what I want to do with this file is take the flowers that I've got in the top right corner and actually reposition them down in this lower left corner. So to do that, I'm going to come across and underneath my spot healing brush tool, I've got this content aware move tool. I'll select that. And before using this tool, I'm going to come up and check the settings that I have up here in my control panel. So I'm going to make sure that I'm in the new selection mode. And then with the mode from here, I'm going to make sure that it is set to move, not extend. And then I'll leave these on the structure on 5 and then the color on 8, which is basically going to determine how this blends with the background. So I want to select the flowers in order to move them. So with this tool, I can just do a very rough lasso around them, clicking and dragging all the way around the edge, and then I'll come back in on the edge of it and back to that first point there, which will create my marching ants. And then to move them, all I need to do is click within that selection and drag them across. I'll bring them down to the lower left corner, and then hovering just outside of the corner of this selection, I get that bendy arrow that allows me to then twist that around at 180 degrees, and I'll hold shift so that it locks it into position, and then drag it down over to that corner, and I'll also just increase it a little bit in size, so I'll take that up to there. Right, excellent. So now I'm ready to click on my commit button there, and then that's now just doing that move. And you can see by looking up in the top right corner now, it has successfully replaced those flowers with this blue linen fabric. And then if I deselect by Command or Control D, it's also helped to blend these flowers into the background. I'd probably need to also go in maybe with my Refine Edge or potentially my Spot Healing brush tool to help this blend a little bit more, and even a little bit of that work done over here. But you get the idea of how quickly it can be to just select and move something using that tool. Now that I've done that, I've decided that I actually want to remove those flowers altogether. So we'll have a look at a tool we can use to just completely get rid of them. We'll jump over to our toolbar and grab the patch tool. Alright, so with the patch tool, I want to make sure that my patch is set to normal and that the source is set to source, not destination, because the source is going to use the pixels that I drag my patch to blend over the top of the area that I'm trying to patch. So if I come down here, I'm going to do another marquee, just a loose marquee around the edge of this area that I want to replace. So just dragging that around with the patch tool, coming back to where I started from to create that selection. And then it's just a case of clicking within the area that I'm trying to replace and then dragging this across. Now I'm going to try and find an area that basically will fill that area with the linen. So if I come up to the top right corner where I actually grabbed these flowers from initially, we can see that it's now going to basically replicate that area over the top of the area that I'm trying to patch. And then when I release with that, it will try and blend that with its surroundings. And that's done a pretty good job. I'll just hit Command or Control D to deselect that. Now down here, there is a little bit of messy kind of blending going on. I could quickly jump across and grab my Spot Healing tool with that and maybe just patch over the top of that. Or I could also use my clone stamping tool to fix that up as well. But you know, as a very quick example, we can see how well that has blended in with the background. Okay, so for our last example here, we're going to work on fixing or retouching this image. We're just going to basically fix up this purple haze that I've got at the very top here. And I'm also going to have a go at duplicating or replicating some of these lights that we've got sort of twinkling in the background. And the tool I'm going to use for that is coming across to my clone stamp tool. So with the clone stamp tool, what we need to do is firstly set the size of our brush. Coming up here again, we can play around with the overall size and the hardness. I'm going to keep the hardness right down at 0%. It's going to give me a soft airbrushed edge, make it smoother when it blends. Cool, and I'll make sure my opacity is set up at 100%. My mode is also set to normal so that it completely copies the area over the top of the area that I'm trying to fix up. So to get rid of this purple haze, I need to, first of all with this tool, select an area that's going to be my source, the area that is going to clone from. And I do that by holding down the Option or the Alt key. And when I do that, we see the brush or the cursor change to the crosshair. When I see the crosshair, I can then just click once with my mouse. And essentially what that has done is taken a snapshot of the area that the brush is currently over the top of. And we'll see now as I move across and hover over the top of that purple area, I'm actually getting a preview of the area that I'm about to clone. Now I'm not holding the mouse down at the moment, I'm just moving it over the top of the area. So if I would like to apply this color or this area and clone over the top of my purple haze, I'm just going to click and hold down with this and then start dragging to the right. And you can see as I'm doing that, down to the lower left-hand corner, there's a little cross there, and that's showing me where I'm actually cloning from. So it actually gives you an indication of where you're cloning from over the top of this. And you can see I've very quickly managed to get rid of that purple haze just by dragging across there. If I wanted to reselect an area, I can just come down here, holding down Option or Alt, taking another snapshot, and then coming back over to another area that I want to clone over the top of, and then just drag and brush over the top of that. So that's done a pretty good job at fixing up that purple haze. Now coming down here to duplicate some of these twinkling lights, what I'll do is I'll hover over the top of one of them there, and I'll just increase the size of my brush using the right bracket here, the square bracket, bring it up a couple of notches so that it's just slightly larger than the twinkling light that I've got there. And then I'm going to hold down the Option key, and right in the center of that light, I'm just going to click once to take a snapshot of it. And then if I move myself along here, we can see that I'm getting a preview of that twinkling light that I'm about to recreate, and I'll just place it there, and I'll just click once, and there we go, it's created that light. I'll come down, I'll grab another one. I'll come down to this twinkling light here. I'll reduce the size of my brush slightly so that it's more closely around that one. Holding down Option, clicking once on that light, and then moving up here, and then just clicking once again to duplicate that light. And I could continue with that process just by finding a light and then hovering over the top of it, making my brush size roughly the same size as the light, holding Option or Alt, taking a snapshot of that, and then moving along and finding an area where it might replicate quite well. Excellent, so that's been a bit of a rundown on some of the key tools that we've got for retouching. We've got these tools here, our spot healing brush tool for going in for fine lines. We have our patch tool if we want to completely remove something from our image. And we also have our content aware move tool if we're trying to move an object around within our image. And then we also have our clone stamp tool, and that's great for going in and cleaning up larger areas and also duplicating areas within our image. In the next video, we'll be taking a look at how to successfully export your images for use online. See you in the next video.